Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Asher Marketing Podcast. I'm Anthony Giuliano, and my guest this week is Taylor Monaco with Fort Wayne Middles. Taylor, how you doing?
I'm good, Anthony. How are you?
I am good. It's been a while since we have seen each other in the real world.
It has. Yeah, it has. It's good to see you again.
Well, you too, and thanks for doing the podcast. So you are somewhat new to Fort Wayne Middles. Tell me what that's been like. How long have you been there, and how's it going?
Yeah, it is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I think, closed out my third month.
Okay.
And like a lot of new roles, sometimes it feels like I started last week, and sometimes it feels like it's been 2 years already.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm getting acclimated quickly. But they have a joke there that you're new until you're there for about 5 years.
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm just gearing up to feel new for a while.
Okay. Well, there's some comfort in that because you can claim to be new and claim ignorance.
I'm going to use that card for a while, yeah.
I still do that after 17 years here at Asher, so...
And it works.
Play that as long as you can.
Good. All right.
Well, we started where you are now, but we want to go back to the beginning of your story because, as you know, on this podcast, we talk about career path, we talk about the organization you work for, and some of the things you're working on. When it comes to career path, you have an interesting story because you have been in very different places geographically, and then you moved back, and then you moved back there, and then you came back. So walk us through that process, and let's start at the beginning. And what I mean by that is tell me when you first started thinking about careers, what were you thinking you would do, and did you continue down that path, or did you take a detour?
Yeah, so I think the first time I really started thinking about careers, I picked college before I picked a career.
Okay.
So I grew up in San Diego, California, and I went to Miami of Ohio.
Okay. An Asher client, by the way, so we're big Miami fans here at Asher.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, go Redhawks. So I mainly picked it because it was across the country from home.
Okay,
And
so you wanted a different experience.
Yeah, I wanted to experience the Midwest. I wanted to get away. I actually have family in Cincinnati, and
Okay.
I was third generation at Miami. So there was some reasons behind that. I had an older brother there at the time. Anyway, I shadowed a friend of my brother's, went to all her classes, and she was in a lot of film studies classes. And I have always been a big fan, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, of storytelling. And I fell in love with the classes.
Yeah.
And so I walked the campus. It's all red brick. I think I visited in late September, and I went, that's it. I'm throwing out my other applications.
It's a beautiful campus. It's kind of the quintessential Midwestern campus. Yeah.
Right. You're going, first of all, am I in Ohio?
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
I'm in Boston or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And am I in a movie? Like, it doesn't feel real. So I fell in love with the campus, and I fell in love with communications and wanted to be sitting in those classrooms, watching those movies, studying the stories. And so I don't know that I had this career in mind.
Sure.
But I think that's when I started realizing I had a love for compelling messaging and stories that could take you somewhere. So I picked Miami, and I think it kind of started there.
All right. So you're at Miami, and then let's talk about where your first move is geographically, because I know from our previous conversation that you've been in Indianapolis, you've been back to California, you've kind of landed back in Fort Wayne, but I'm not sure of the chronology of that.
Yeah.
So help me out.
You or anyone else. Everybody gets very confused asking about the history. So I did job search a little bit in the Midwest, but ultimately I had an internship my junior year of college in San Diego at a public affairs firm called Southwest Strategies. It shows up on my resume a couple of times.
Yep.
And I loved that firm. I learned so much from the people that I worked for there, the projects that I got to be a part of. And so I basically harassed my boss from junior year until I got a job after I graduated, until they were willing to create a position for me.
Okay.
I just learned a lot about persistence from my dad. And so I did the traditional job searching like I was supposed to.
Yep.
But what really landed me the job was every single month I had a calendar reminder that was like, call Chris Wall and ask him if there's a position available yet. And so for almost a year straight, I did that until they said, okay, Taylor, you can come back. There's a account executive position with your name on it. And, you know,
that's great.
So I ended up back in San Diego for that reason, mostly a love of that agency.
Yeah. All right.
So I started there in San Diego.
Okay.
And actually, I think 6 to 8 or 9 months into that position, 2008, everybody was getting laid off.
Yes.
They created a position for me.
Oh, wow.
Didn't really need one.
Okay.
So it was last one in, first one out. And I was laid off, my first job out of college.
Jeez. Yeah.
And while it was devastating, I've learned so much. And I look back now and I'm like, I'm so much stronger for it because it sent me into job searching all over again when no one was hiring. I had just moved out, bought my first car, was on my own in San Diego. I was living like 3 miles from my parents, but I was like, I will not move back in with them.
And San Diego is not a very cheap place to live.
It is not cheap. Nope. So I made searching for a job, my full-time job, and it took me, I think, like a couple days over a month, like 32 or 33 days to find another job.
That's really not too bad.
It was not bad. In 2008, again, like this was everywhere. So, it's just one of those life lessons that at the time was pretty rough. Now, super grateful for it. And so I landed at a wealth management firm, and I spent about a year there doing communications, public relations for the owner of the firm was kind of a radio personality, taught retirement planning seminars around the country. So I traveled with him, planned those events, kind of did talking points and prep for his appearances on the morning news. I mean, it was just one of those, like, you wear a lot of different hats, but all communications, all what I was, learning to do. So it ended up being, again, like, just I was putting all kinds of tools in my tool belt. I don't think I realized that at the time.
Yeah.
But looking back, I mean, it was incredible. So now I'm less than 2 years out of school, have 2 jobs under my belt, and so much experience.
Yeah.
And then I met my then husband. That's an even longer story, so we won't go into it.
Okay.
But he was in Fort Wayne from San Diego. And I go, well, you're really close to Indianapolis, so I'll just go there.
Yeah.
And I had friends from school there, so I moved across the country.
All right. So he was from San Diego like you, but was working in Fort Wayne?
Yep. He was on the Fort Wayne Fire Department. Still is.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So that would be a path if we went down there. That might take the rest of the time we went together.
Yep.
But yeah, okay. So you end up working in Indianapolis, and you had experience in the Midwest, but had you spent much time in Indianapolis proper to that point?
A couple of trips with a college roommate who was from there, which I think was why I was comfortable moving back. I'm like, I know Indy a little bit. It's a great city. I think I can do this.
Yeah. All right. So how long were you in Indianapolis, and what does work look like during that time?
About a year and a half.
Okay.
And I was at Miller Brooks, an advertising agency there.
Yep.
Yeah. Great experience. Wonderful people. And I mostly I was in their PR department, which at the time was about 10 people. And like one of our biggest clients was Certainteed. So I was doing PR for like building products and stuff. So again, like really technical writing, more tools in the tool belt, gained a lot of experience.
Yeah.
Then we got engaged, and I'm like, okay, Fort Wayne.
Yeah. So was the thinking? Let me go back. I said I was going to take us down this path, but I have to ask a question. So he's in Fort Wayne. Were you thinking Indianapolis is close to Fort Wayne? Okay.
I was. I'm like, it's a 2-hour drive. I can do that, and I'm not. I have that kind of personality. I'm like, I want to make this relationship work, but Fort Wayne, like, where is that? And I'm not going there without a ring on my finger. And I'm just independent enough that I wasn't willing to do that. And I did have a couple friends in Indianapolis at the time. Yeah. So I was like, I think I can do that. It's a big city.
Sure.
And, as soon as I moved, both those friends moved away.
Oh,
One of them went to Bloomington for law school. The other moved to Chicago for a job. So I ended up in Indianapolis knowing nobody.
Oh, wow.
Again, very independent, good experience.
Sure.
I did a lot of networking and
Yeah. All right. So then you moved to Fort Wayne.
Then I moved to Fort Wayne.
And what does that look like professionally and otherwise?
I landed at One Lucky Guitar.
Yep.
And I was there the whole time I was in Fort Wayne that time. So
Which is about a year?
Think a little under 2 years.
All right. And that's where you and I met, because you were in Weil and I Leadership Institute, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
I got pretty involved because, again, and I will say this, Fort Wayne is a very different place today than it was then. I think, obviously, it has a lot more to offer. We could talk about all the ways our downtown has grown and all of that. But also, I think it's a much more welcoming place.
I agree.
Could have been my experience, but I just do think it's more welcoming. And I had a really hard time getting plugged in. It felt like a lot of people were from here, had grown up here, already had their circles. So I had to kind of really work. So it was like, Weil and I helped, and friends at One Lucky Guitar helped, but it was hard to kind of like get connected and get plugged in. So I didn't settle in as well my first time in Fort Wayne. Yeah,
I think it's a little more common today that people aren't from here. And it's not to say anything against the people who are from here, because some of them are very welcoming. But I would agree with that. I kind of planted my flag as, I'm the guy who's not from here, and that's what I'm going to be, and never really fully assimilated until I woke up one day and I was like, oh, I've been here for 25 years. I guess I'm a as close to my hometown as anything.
Right, exactly. And yes, it is definitely not anything against the people who are from here, because it was on me too. I was 1 foot in, 1 foot out for sure the first time I moved here. And to prove that, shortly after we got married, this was 2011 now. We got married in November 2011, and in spring of 2012, I went, look, we're married. Eventually, we might have kids.
Yep.
What are we doing here? Because my husband's family and mine were both in Southern California.
Yeah.
So I dragged him away from the fire department back to San Diego, which proves I kind of had 1 foot out the whole time.
Yeah.
And so that is the part of the story where we go back to San Diego. We both left our jobs.
Okay. This is getting interesting. Okay.
It was crazy. I mean, not crazy, because you get like San Diego, right?
Oh, sure.
Perks.
Hey,
we're like, let's go back to some sunshine. And
given that it's March 1st when this is being recorded, that sounds pretty great right now.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. So we moved back to eventually a condo half a block from the beach.
Nice.
We had a yellow lab at the time. It was dog beach. We woke up and walked the beach every morning. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah.
And we moved back to some great jobs. He sold pharmaceuticals at the time, and I got a job launching Uber in the San Diego market when Uber was brand new, and you still had to explain to people what that was.
Wow.
So that, again, incredible experience. So startup there now in my repertoire, which was...
So did you work with the CEO of Uber?
I knew him. I didn't work super closely with him, but we went on some trips. Like that was when, I don't even remember what the number was, but we hit some milestone, and we all went to Tahoe, and I think there was 80 employees when I was there.
Wow.
And I don't even know
I ask because there's some kind of mini series that's coming out that is. Yes. Yep. Sounds like it's going to be interesting, and maybe more so for you because you had that experience.
I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to it.
So you're working in San Diego, you're going to the beach, everything's working great, but then what happens?
So I actually left Uber after about 7 months because startups are grueling, and it was my first year of marriage. And you start to see a trend in my career where especially as I look back now after all these years, that I've been really intentional about saying family or work, family or work. And there have been times when I've looked back and said, oh, did I do the right thing? And could my career have looked different if I didn't?
Yeah.
But it's hard to question that when you pick family over work, and I always have. So I left Uber because I wanted my first year of marriage to be in more investment in my marriage than in my job.
Yep.
So I went back to Southwest Strategies. And actually, I wasn't even looking, but they knew I was back in town because I reconnected with friends, and they said, hey, would you be interested? We are really short on people. And I went, oh my gosh, this job is draining me. Yes, I'm so interested.
Yeah.
So I went back and actually spent the majority of my time in San Diego at Southwest Strategies.
And you're coming back armed with more experience, more tools in the toolbox. Yeah.
Yeah. And that again, about a year and a half there after, because we were about 2 years in San Diego. So maybe 6-7 months at Uber, and then a year and a half at Southwest Strategies. And that was a blast. Got to work on some really fun projects, got some PRSA awards, like just highlight. Love those people, love that work. But my husband really missed the fire department. And then we had a baby. And I went, I don't care what I do.
Yeah.
Like I'll quit. Like it really changes you.
It really does. Yeah. In ways that are hard to explain to people who haven't experienced it.
Exactly. Yeah. So I went, hey, if you want to go back to the fire department, give the chief a ring. They'll let you back. I'll move anywhere in the country. I'll do whatever we need to do.
Wow.
Family.
Wow.
It just, changes you.
So where do you land professionally at that time when you come back to Fort Wayne?
Yeah. So I had a good friend who I actually met here in Fort Wayne, Monaco Holb. And we were in touch, and she said, well, if you're going back to Fort Wayne, I actually know about this remote job that you could do from Fort Wayne for a nonprofit called United Through Reading. They connect military families who are separated, usually spouses deployed is the most typical situation, through reading children's storybooks and shipping them home to the kids.
Okay.
So they stay connected with mom or dad or grandparents or whatever. And they needed a director of communications.
Okay.
So it was a little bit of event planning and then all the things I did,
And where was United Through Reading based?
Both DC and San Diego.
Okay.
They had just gotten rid of their brick and mortar.
This is where some of the confusion for me comes in, because I remember I was like, I heard that Taylor's back in town. But I thought she left, and she's working for a company in San Diego. I'm confused.
Yes. Yeah. So I was here. So I don't feel like I was fully here, even when I was here, because I was first of all, I was doing the mom thing.
Yeah, sure.
And then I had my second child,
Yeah.
Lincoln, when I was still working from them, which, I'm just so grateful to have had a remote job.
Yeah,
that
sure.
was pretty flexible during that
Sure.
time. And I think I actually bumped down to like technically part-time, like a 30-hour a week when I had her. And so I was there almost 4 years. So remote for almost 4 years.
Wow,
Like
yeah.
not a lot of adult interaction outside of a video.
Yeah.
And then traveling twice a year at least, once to San Diego and once to DC for our larger fundraisers. And not as connected in Fort Wayne, just because between mom and that job, there wasn't a lot of space, it didn't feel like. And
Sure.
again, I was
Well,
very
again,
focused
priorities.
on-
It's
Yes.
like if I have something's going to give, and if it's going to be the social interaction, that's what's going to give.
Right. Yeah. So I started hearing about some jobs that were open
Yep.
and getting contacted like once by a recruiter and then once by some friends who heard about
Yeah.
open positions. And it just kind of started. My kids were getting a little bit older. Definitely not self-sufficient yet. They're still not self-sufficient.
Yeah.
But, and so I just kind of started getting that itch. Like, I'm here in Fort Wayne. I need to like leave my house,
Yeah.
leave my like, at
Yeah.
home, desk
Yeah.
and get connected again. And
Which is ironic to considering where the world went the last couple of years.
I know,
but
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I can't imagine if that like then
Yeah.
entered me into the season of COVID. But
Yeah.
So I guess I just started kind of having that desire, and I actually had a number of like interviews over I think like a 6-month period, and where that landed was kind of me waiting for the right opportunity, and then I went to Lasting Change, which most people know as Lifeline Youth and Family Services and Crosswinds, working for Brenda Gerber-Vincent. She was there at that time, and I was able to build a communications department from the ground up. They basically had said, we've neglected this area, haven't really paid any attention here. And now we're realizing like, oops, that's not a good thing. And so will you kind of like figure out what we need and then help us build it?
Yeah.
And so I was there from the end of 2017 to basically early 2020.
Yeah.
And was able to build a team there. At the most, it was like 5.5 people. It was like a matrix management situation. And it was so much fun.
Yeah.
People look back and say, like, what are you proud of in your career? And I always think about the things that involve people.
Yeah.
And that team that I was able to structure there. I think we talked at one point because Devontae Beckham was on my team, and you know him. And
Devontae's great.
Yeah, such a talented individual. So I had a lot of fun doing that. And that team was a lot of fun. We had some great memories together. So that's where I landed there.
Yeah.
So I got out of my house and kind of back into the community again. And then when I was kind of looking for a change after that, is actually when I first learned about Fort Wayne Metals. So it's obviously not when I ended up there.
Sure.
But and this is going to take us on a little longer story, but it's one I think that's worth telling.
Yeah.
So in 2018, I had kind of some weird health things going on. I started blacking out, much the way you would when you like get up out of bed too fast in the morning.
Wow.
So just completely lose vision.
Wow.
But it was happening when I was like sitting down like we are right now, like in a meeting. So no movement. And I had no idea why. It was like, am I drinking too much caffeine? Like not enough water? What's happening? And series of things go on. And my friend talks me into going in and getting one of those heart monitors. And long story short, I wind up at Cleveland Clinic.
Wow.
And they have no idea what's going on with me.
Wow.
They tag it like a junctional tachycardia thing. I'm so bad at medical, but basically they didn't have
You're
a
already
name
better
for
at
it.
medical because you could pronounce something. So,
I know.
Yes.
Well, it was like when you run strips during an EKG, a few things can come up. I think typically one thing comes up and tells you what's going on. I had like 8 layers of things happening.
Wow.
And they're like, normally you wouldn't have like ventricular tachycardia plus an AFib. And so they were like, this doesn't look right. Which is why they had me going to Cleveland Clinic. Cleveland Clinic was like, this is super rare. We've only seen like 8 cases of this.
Wow.
So again, long story short, I wound up having a cardiac ablation. And I went in saying, if they can't figure this out, they're going to have to put a pacemaker in you.
Wow.
I was 33 at the time.
Jeez.
So it was like, you don't want that.
Yeah.
So the course of these blackouts starting and this cardiac ablation, which by the way was successful, no pacemaker, not a cardio patient anymore. So this all ended really, really well. But for those like 9 months, first of all, I couldn't drink any caffeine, which is there anything worse than that? 'Cause I don't think there is. I couldn't work out. So I was kind of scared to drive because it's like, you don't want to black out when you're driving.
Sure. Especially with
progressively
kids.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it was progressively getting worse. So it was getting to the point where I was like, I might need to actually stop driving. Like, what is going on?
Yeah.
So it just was kind of a crazy year. It's 2018. So when I start looking for a new opportunity and I sit down with my now boss, Evan Wood, and Helgi Hinninger, who's been on this podcast, they both start telling me about Fort Wayne Metals. And I think a lot of people in the community are like, okay, you're a manufacturer. And what else?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't know.
Sure. Something to do with metals.
Right,
Yes,
exactly. Is
yes.
it big and heavy metal? We don't know.
Yeah.
And so they're like, no, we actually make like fine precision wire. It's really thin. This is what it's used for. A bunch of it ends up in the human body. So I start telling them my story, and they're like, your ablation was done with wire that we made.
Wow.
And so I'm like, this is nuts. Like Fort Wayne Metals wire was in my body. This is what healed me. And so it stuck with me. They didn't have a position at the time, but I kind of made those relationships. And
So
kept in touch with them.
how did you make that connection initially? What put you at the table with each other?
So I was looking for an opportunity, and a mutual friend of, I think, Evan's and mine had said, you should.
So it was an
get in touch
informational
with Evan.
interview.
Yeah. So again, this persistence
Yeah.
that made me stop that boss a long time ago.
Sure.
I just reached out to Evan and said, hey, can I buy you lunch? I want to learn about Fort Wayne Metals.
Well, it's a great thing to do.
Yeah,
I
wish
encourage people
more
to do that all the
would do it.
time.
Yeah, it's so beneficial. And even if there's no agenda, right?
That's right.
Just sit down and get
Meet
to know
people. Yeah,
right?
that's it. Very simple. Yeah.
So, and Evan was just explaining what they did and what their products were used for. And I'm like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I had no idea that this was even medical. And can you tell me more about what that looks like? So, he's saying heart stents and braces and telling me all the things that their wire did. And his wife actually had a heart thing too. So as he's talking about this, I'm going, I just had a cardiac ablation last year. And he was like, yep, that's us.
Wow.
So that connection just stuck with me. And I've had a lot of nonprofit in my background. And so it just clicked.
Yeah.
Like this is a company.
Yeah.
It's not a nonprofit, but there's real mission and purpose in this work. And so, like I said, there was no opportunity at the time.
Yeah.
But Fort Wayne Metals just kind of stuck with me.
Yeah.
And so, again, that's later in the journey, but
Yeah.
But yeah, that's when that connection first happened.
Wow.
So-
Okay. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about Fort Wayne Metals. You've done a great job of giving us a sense of what the business is all about. But what are some things that you say to people when they ask you about this new place that you work? How do you describe it?
Describe my position or describe the company?
Let's start with the company and then
Yeah.
go into your position.
Yeah. Honestly, I've been doing a lot of kind of what I just told you. I really think that Fort Wayne Metals is one of Fort Wayne's best kept secrets. And I think that's unintentional. So what I've experienced coming in is just this posture of humility. I mean, Scott Glaze, our CEO,
Yeah.
is an incredible
Who's also the reason
leader.
why J.K. O'Donnell's is downtown.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Among other things.
He's over the years poured a lot into not just our downtown, but surrounding area downtowns, and is just a big fan of giving back and investing in Fort Wayne. And he wouldn't want me to tell you that. I mean, there's just this incredible posture of humility, and I think that runs through the company. So as I am a new employee, learning what's been done in the past, what's going on, what have we put out there in terms of marketing and community engagement. There's not been a ton that's intentional because most of the focus is just very employee centric, very customer centric, very employee centric. And what we're doing for the community, there's a lot of support, but we're not talking about it.
Yeah.
And so the symptom of that is that people aren't hearing what Fort Wayne Metals does and what the company is all about.
Well, some of that I think is very Midwestern, which I can say to you because you're from a coast like I am, where it's like believed to be a binary choice. We can either be humble or tell our story, but we can't do both.
Right.
And, I very much encourage people. I say, no, it's okay to tell people your story with the intention of being helpful and being available to more people, because if they don't know your story, they can't choose you. And if you think you're great, you deserve to be chosen, but no one can choose you if your story is too much of a well-kept secret.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I think as, what's exciting about my position now being created, it's community engagement manager. And really the community there is external and internal and really largely internal. Like I said, very employee centric. It's internal communications and all that. But I think for the first time, allows us to do that. And I think there's a recognition that, we can do this humbly. We can talk about what it is that we do, and we can do a better job of educating, even if it is just as an employer, right? And talk about who we are, what we do, so that people understand where they're coming as a place of work.
Yeah, well, and especially important right now. There are organizations that we're doing a lot of work with on the employee recruitment and retention side who are just now understanding the value of telling your story into perpetuity, not necessarily only to reach customers and prospects, but to reach prospective employees who may not know anything about you, and they have to have a sense of what you're all about if you're going to have a prayer of recruiting them and keeping them.
Right, exactly, yeah.
So what are you doing on the community engagement side to the external audiences? What does that look like?
Yeah, so that is I'd say it's kind of one of the pillars of my job description moving in, and we are just now working on an employer branding campaign where we're doing that very thing, right? I mean, we have one of the positions that was hired at the same time as mine is talent sourcing. And so we're like everyone else kind of working on those recruiting efforts. But like you said, there's this, okay, we can talk about what our benefits are. And like I said, Fort Wayne Metal is so employee centric. Like we've got a lot to talk about there. We really do. But if we're talking about that and people are going, well, great, but who are you?
Yeah, what do you do?
There's a misstep there, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You can tout benefits and talk about what a great place this is to work, but if people don't understand who and what is my work actually accomplishing and doing, and you're a manufacturer, but what are you manufacturing and what's the end result, then you've really missed an important step there. So I think that's where this employer branding effort comes in to make sure that the education piece comes first.
Yeah, well, and everyone's always thinking, what's the catch, right? If you say, we have really satisfied employees and they think it's a great place to work and you should listen to them, people go, that's nice, but what's the catch? Oh, I get the catch. You're a metals company, so it's a dangerous and dirty work environment.
Right.
And then you walk into one of the most pristine work environments you could ever imagine at Fort Wayne Metals, but if people don't know that, they're going to bypass you and go on to other opportunities.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I think, I don't want to be repetitive for your loyal listeners. I know that Helgi was on this and he did a great job of talking about that. Like, people hear manufacturing, they think these really big, you have to have big muscles to work here and all these, big pieces of metal. And we're creating wire that's like 1/8 the size of a human hair because it's traveling through your arteries and veins. It's being used as a guide wire in surgeries. And it's breaking apart that stigma that people hear when they hear the word manufacturing.
Yeah.
And so, when you sit down and you talk to someone and it's like, the reality is most of our employees either have had our product in their body, currently have our product in their body, or know a loved one or friend that does.
Wow.
And so when you start with that, it completely breaks apart that stigma of,
for sure.
Okay, this is medical manufacturing. I don't think it's a term, but I think it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So your work is not really customer and prospect facing then?
No.
Yeah.
That would be Helgi's department.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, talk about, I would imagine that most of the stuff you're focused on right now is learning the job. But what are some of the things that you're focused on that are taking up a lot of your time, a lot of your energy? Maybe you're keeping you up at night a little bit. Maybe you're exciting, or a combination of all those things. Yeah.
So, that employer branding campaign is one piece, but I'd say the majority of my time currently right now is we just launched, right now is going on, an employee engagement survey. So that we kind of start, as I came into my new role, we started from scratch. So we used to do an employee engagement survey through Gallup. And this year we launched one through a book called Reset by the CEO of SHRM. And so it's a completely different approach. And it's honestly was such the perfect project for me to learn, taking over internal communications, to learn all our channels, how our employees are receptive to them, and walk through it. So it has been, keeping me up at night a little bit for sure. All new jobs do, but it's honestly been a blast. Like, it's making me realize how much I love this job, this work, these people that I get to do this for, because it's all about making sure everybody knows their voice matters.
Yeah.
Like this.
So what's the crux of the reset philosophy versus other ways of doing employee engagement?
Yeah. So I guess I'll just give you the overview of the survey. So the book is called Reset, but the actual survey is feeding into something called the NICE score.
Okay.
And, or at least we're calling it the NICE score.
Yeah.
And the NICE stands for Net Promoter Score, which is like whether or not you'd recommend your place of work to your friends and family. The I stands for inclusion. Do we foster a sense of belonging and so on and so forth? The C is curiosity, so innovation. Are we an innovative company? And the E is employer brand.
Okay.
So that speaks to like, external
Sure.
perception of our company. So the survey feeds into part of that score.
Okay.
There's also external elements that do as well. So
Sure.
it's just a completely different approach than this much longer survey that was done in the past. And again, I wasn't there for that, so I don't know
Sure.
all of the information.
Sure.
But this was much simpler, an easier ask of our employees. And so for me, coming in and getting to focus messaging on shared accountability and how an employee experience is not created by a CEO or a team leader or any one department or individual, but the shared accountability of we all contribute to what a positive culture looks like. And in order for us to pull data and see where our gaps are or get better or look at any one area means we all have to contribute. We all have to offer our voice to this process. Has been a lot of fun for me and to see it positively.
Well, it seems like it's very well aligned with what I've seen as a shift over the past couple of years, especially the last year, where, the old mantra used to be the customer is always right. And then we learned the customer is not always right. And then we said, well, the customer's first. And I think what we've learned is, you know what, if you put your people first, they're going to put your customers first, but your people are kind of 1A and customers are 1B. And if you don't get the first one right, you're never going to get the second one right.
Without our people, we can't serve our customer.
That's right.
Is everybody not learning that right now?
Yeah,
with,
totally.
With
totally.
recruiting issues?
Yeah.
Yep,
Well, that's
absolutely.
great. Well, that sounds like fascinating stuff. Anything? Do you have time for anything else? That's a really big job. Anything else that's playing into it?
Gosh, you mean in terms of other projects?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of learning. I think, I don't know that it was like any other large buckets, but there's a lot of just like slow transitions in terms of handing over other internal communications things. I mean, Fort Wayne Metals is just so large.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of like monthly updates, employee events. There's a super robust like employee rewards program that I have a team that manages all of that. So there's just a lot of like small transitioning pieces over to me so that I can start to manage all of them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of all falling in that like internal communications bucket.
Okay.
Which
right.
honestly, I've waited a lot of my career to have a job that looks like this, that has this description. So it's been a lot of fun.
Well, that's great. So ideally, you're going to be here for a while, or at least in this position. So let me ask you a question. And I ask this out of more personal curiosity, because I haven't met a lot of people who are in the same position. How are you balancing, I have a family that is 2,000 miles away that I want to stay connected to, but I'm trying to build a life here? Because it's, again, this is personal curiosity. It's comes with some significant trade-offs.
Yeah.
It's a shift that I had to make and have dealt with the upside and compromise of that. How are you doing with that?
It's hard.
Yeah.
But my husband and I have just made a commitment to like prioritizing vacations. And when I say vacations, some of that is like traveling to see family. So,
and San Diego's not a bad place to go on
San
vacation.
Diego's not a bad place to go, but honestly, we have not been. I would have to sit here and think about the last time we were in San Diego. So we've not been great about that. But I actually have a sister that followed me out here. She probably wouldn't like that term, but she met her husband visiting my husband and I. So she actually lives here now. So I do have one family member that's close.
Okay.
But my parents, because they now have two kids, come out here
Nice.
often.
Okay.
So I kind of cheat the system in that they come to us.
Yeah.
Our parents come out here and visit us quite
Well,
a
that's
bit.
great.
So I cheat that. But we went to Tennessee a couple weekends ago, and my in-laws visited us. I mean, yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're doing that, because I
Doesn't really
think
answer
one
your
of the
question well, does it?
No, it does. One of the traps I think people get caught into is I found myself, I was always going only to see family, and no disrespect to them, but you got to do other stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to
think
hear you're doing that.
That's where I was going with that. Is we went to Tennessee a couple weekends ago and met them. So like where we can merge vacations with family, we try to do that, because I got really sick of only going home.
Yeah, totally.
And not getting to see different places.
Totally.
So last summer we went up to Michigan. We met family there. So
If you don't, it feels like an obligation.
Right, exactly. So
Yeah.
I think we've tried to make that work.
Okay. Well, that was an interesting little diversion.
Yeah,
That's
sorry.
the softer side of the Asher Marketing Podcast. No, that was me. I took us down that path, but it's fascinating for me to hear that, and I appreciate your honesty in saying it is a challenge. All right, well, let's pivot to the speed round of the show, and I'm going to ask you a few questions that are more short and pithy, designed for any kind of answer you want to give. If it's short and pithy, great. If it's not, that's fine too. Okay, so first question. I think you've already told us this, but what is your best advice for building a successful, fulfilling career?
So I am a lifelong learner, and I think that my answer would be the same to somebody starting their career tomorrow or somebody looking to retire in like 2 months. And that would be curiosity. I think when you lose that, you lose everything.
Yeah.
So I think it's what keeps things interesting for me. I think that's why I'm so excited about Fort Wayne Metals and knowing that I can be here for a very long time is I will be learning for a very long time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that things get really stale when and you've failed, quite honestly, when you get to a point where you think you've arrived and you've got nothing else to learn.
Yeah.
So I think successful, I think fulfilling, I think invigorating when you're constantly learning and you're constantly asking questions.
Yeah.
And you can't ever be afraid to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we get a 2-for-1. There's the persistence piece, knock on doors, knock the door down if you need to, but also the curiosity piece. Okay. Second question, and this one I think you've alluded to, but what is something that you want people to know about your organization that's either a myth you want to bust or something that's underappreciated that you want to amplify?
Yeah. This one I think I would have already shared, and I don't want to take away from it, but it is that it's the impact that Fort Wayne Metals has. I think it's more than 95% of our product winds up in the human body. I don't think very many people know that.
Yeah.
And just to think about what that means. I mean, I will never forget my first week. So they have you start, I think most people, when you start, they have you do what they call exposure training. So you head out onto the manufacturing floor and you put your safety goggles on and the whole 9 yards. And you literally get to stand alongside the wire jars. They show you how the machines work. They tell you all about their jobs. And, they'd schedule me to be out there for like an hour, and like 3 hours later, they'd be like, "Where's Taylor?" I'm like, "She's still on the floor. I don't know." And so, but our employees are just wonderful. They're so willing to share time with you, to tell you all about what they're doing. And again, that curiosity piece, I just am really good at asking questions.
Yeah, sure.
So I would continue to do that. And when they were done telling me all about the technical parts of their job, I would just start asking, like, why do you love this? Why, you've been here for 27 years. Like, why is that? Why are you still here? And most employees would give me some answer along the lines of, everybody has bad days, like not everybody's perfect, but I can always go home knowing like somebody's life is sometimes saved. And if not saved, then improved. Like quality of life is improved because of the product that I'm working on today. Yeah. And it's, how many manufacturing jobs can you say that? So I feel like it's such a unicorn. Like I have, I'm not in nonprofit work anymore. And there's hard parts to that. I think anyone who moves away from nonprofit will tell you that.
Sure.
But there's so much purpose and impact in this work. Yeah. And I think that's what I want people to know about Fort Wayne Metals.
Yeah, that's great. All right, last question. Is there any tip or trick or tool or hack that you use in your work, or it could be in balancing a young family and work? It could be anything that you think deserves a little more attention. It could be something that's well known that you just want to speak to, or something that's not well known that you want to amplify.
Yeah, this probably isn't anything groundbreaking. I live and die by a project management system.
And which one do you use?
So for years, I used Monday.com, and I had to find my way in the dark when I moved away from that recently. And I'm trying to learn to use Rike.
I've never even heard of Rike.
Okay, Wrike.
All right.
I think I'm going to fall in love with it. I'm in my learning stages.
Okay.
So, but I can't function without something like that, like a fancy to-do list, basically. I schedule my time like crazy. And that is, so I guess maybe this is the way to make this advice sound fancier, is somebody once told me that like I'm not a mom and then also like a career woman. Like there's one of me.
Yeah.
There's just one.
Yeah.
So I have 2 calendars technically, but they're layered. So I look at them one.
Huge believer
every
in
day,
that. Yeah.
right?
Especially
like
today.
Yeah. I have one of a big, massive hard copy planner because I'm old school like that. And I just like touching the paper.
Yeah.
But I have one of those for after work and during the day. Like there's one of me, there's not 2 of me, and I got to live that way. And so I'm a big like block the calendar for personal life, for work life. I schedule me time.
Yeah.
Like I heard some, I don't know, I read it in some book, like schedule think time.
Yeah.
Like,
Because if you don't, you won't get it.
Right.
If you
exactly.
wait until it falls out of the sky, it's not going to happen.
It's never going to happen. It's
Yeah.
never going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I'll have to look up Reich, but I agree with that wholeheartedly, so much so that, my world is driven by clients. So I have client codes for all the clients I work with.
Yeah.
In my to-do list system, I have a client called Home, which is like home stuff.
That's amazing.
And it's all sortable. Okay. I can say, what's all the home stuff I need to do? But I long ago gave up the myth that this is separate. It's not. It's one calendar. It's one to-do list.
Yeah.
Because there are times when if I have 15 minutes at work, I'm going to make a personal call. Sorry, coworkers. If I'm at home and I have 15 minutes to answer an email, great.
Then you're going to do
and if I have to look at 2 things, it's for me with my ADHD, it's like looking at 1,000.
Exactly.
So one thing.
Yep. I hear you're on the ADHD. Yep.
Yeah.
And then you got to respect the personal time that you've blocked.
Correct.
Instead of, which that's the hardest one.
It's the hardest one. It will continue to be a challenge.
Right.
If my experience is anything to speak of.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Taylor, this has been super fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you're back in Northeast Indiana.
Me too. Yeah. Here to stay, I think.
Yeah.
Not
all
going
right.
anywhere.
We've got that on the record, folks. Well, thanks for being here. And thanks to everyone who took the opportunity to listen to this episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast. We'll be back next week with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.